Hey, my name is Sruti. I'm an author and spiritual teacher, and I write and talk about my experience of spiritual awakening and chronic pain. In 2018, I had an allergic reaction to an ear piercing that radically altered my appearance and my life. The condition, which is rare, is called erythromelalgia and feels like you have a hot frying pan stuck to your ear and face. I was also on prednisone for 6 years, which radically altered my appearance for the duration of the illness. Most doctors didn't think I would recover, but that is why I'm sharing what I have to share, because it helped me get through it, and it can help you get through your problems too. Hope you enjoy. So I'm in my early 20s. I'm trying to find a job in Manhattan, and I need an apartment. And one of my friends said she was going to share an apartment with me. We're going to get a 2-bedroom and split the rent. So I go looking for an apartment and find one, take the lease home, pay the deposit, and my job is to sign the lease and bring it back Monday to finalize the transaction. So I take the lease back to this friend's house that I'm staying at, and I pick up the pen and I go to sign the lease, and as the pen gets closer to the paper, the more nauseous and nauseous I'm getting, and I have no idea why. No idea why. So I keep trying to sign this paper, and like as the pen's about to touch the paper, I'm like, and I'm going to throw up on it. And I've never had anything like this happen before. So I'm baffled, and I try again. I pick up the pen, and I pull myself together, and I just like, so I can't. I just like over and over and over, and finally I'm like, all right, I gotta take a break. So I walk away, sleep on it. Next day, wake up, try and sign the paper, pick up the pen, put the pen in the paper. Blah, 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 blah. So now it's becoming a problem. So I only have the weekend to sign this, and for reasons that I don't understand, I cannot sign it. So every time I try and do this, the only way I'll be able to sign it is like you won't be able to read it because there'll be vomit on it. So I don't have a choice. I have to give up, and I'm really embarrassed. So I go back to the agent, and I don't really tell her why. I'm just like, you know what? I changed my mind, and I can't take this apartment. And she was furious. She like threw the money at me, and now I was on my own because obviously she wasn't going to work with me anymore. And I'm just like on Craigslist, and I am starting my job on Monday with no apartment. So I checked the Craigslist. I find this listing. It turns out this girl went to the same college I did. She was my age, and she lived relatively near to where I worked in the city. And I went and visited her. She was pretty nice, and her dad actually owned the building. So she was living downstairs, renting from him while he renovated the middle, and the upstairs was a 2-bedroom that I was going to rent with my friend. So I move all my stuff up there, and I pay the first month, and I get this call, and my friend says, "Oh, hey, I'm not coming." And I'm like, "What do you mean you're not coming?" And she's like, I'm not coming to New York at all. And I was like, "Are you serious? I rented the apartment. It's in my name, and I can't afford to pay by myself." And she's like, "I'm sorry." And I was like, I am so screwed. So I call this girl again downstairs, and I'm like, "Listen, my friend bailed on me. I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm sorry. I can't pay this by myself." And she's like, "Hey, no worries. Why don't you move downstairs, and instead of renting out like a whole apartment, you can just rent a room with me. I have an extra room, and you can live with me, and you'll know someone, and then you don't have to pay that rent, and we'll just take your first month as whatever is applied to your rent." And I'm like, "Cool, thank you." So I move all my stuff downstairs, and She's super nice, like I said. The only problem is she works in finance. So I actually never see her. She leaves at 6 in the morning and works till 11 at night every day of the week. They told her she wasn't working hard enough at one point and had to come in on weekends. So I really never saw her. I left after her. I got back before her. I was in bed by the time she arrived home. So I essentially was living alone in the city that I didn't know anyone, and this enormous city. And I was working at this job that I ended up hating. I mean, it was really competitive. Every day it felt like people were trying to steal my job. I ended up getting promoted. They ended up getting demoted. Some of them did lose their jobs. And even though I always kept mine, I hated it. I was not happy. I didn't feel fulfilled at all or even comfortable. I mean, living in a city where you're just out of college, you can't pay the rent unless you have a paycheck, and your job is always on the line, very stressful. So the other thing was I grew up not like on a farm, but around farmland, and was used to being in the outdoors. I love nature. I love to go for long walks by myself. I'm super introverted. And this city was enormous and there were no trees. So I went to Central Park and they had trees, but they also had just like pavement everywhere and hordes of people and horse-drawn carriages. So I'm like, finally one day in Central Park, I find this sign, this little wooden sign stuck in the ground by like a strip of mulch, and it says nature path. And the nature path is like right next to the paved main path with all the horses and people and whatever. And I'm like, are you serious? This is nature? And I just started to feel so claustrophobic. And even though you're surrounded by all those people, and even though I like being alone, I actually felt lonely. And since I hated my job and lived alone, I just felt this increasing sense of isolation, even while being totally overwhelmed by how many people there were. Then the path flooded. The path is the subway that goes under the water over to Manhattan, and I lived on the other side. And it was like the only way to get to Manhattan that was easy. Otherwise, you have to go in the tunnel with a bus or on the ferry that's like super expensive. So I had to take the bus, and the bus just doesn't move because there's so many cars, there's so much traffic. It just like inches. So you just like inch all the way. So like 3 hours later, I got to work, miserable, carsick, and was like, wow, I'm doomed to do this every time the path floods, which just sounds like I didn't know this, but it frequently does. And that made me nervous. Like, I'm going to be in a tunnel while it floods. Like, what? Then one day I came downstairs and stepped into probably 1.5 feet of water, and the whole downstairs level was completely flooded. Like, there were just like electronics down there, TVs, lamps, all plugged in, all flooded, just horribly dangerous. And my roommate was gone for the day. And I called her and I was like, do you realize that the apartment is flooded? And she was like, no. And she freaks out, but she's at work. So I had to stay home and meet the fire department, who busted down the door and had to fix the sump pump, which I guess I didn't even know we had a sump pump until then, and it broke. And we'd had like this rainstorm and it just all came in. And little did I know Hurricane Sandy was around the corner. But luckily, just before then, I left. And I left because every day I came home, I started to come home and just cry by myself. And I would sit and watch the TV and everything on the TV was depressing. So I would watch this kids show because it was happy. And it was called Avatar: The Last Airbender. And that was my joy. So I came home, cried, and the big joy of my whole day was watching a kids show. And so it was sort of like, well, this is my life. And I was dealing with a chronic illness, and I was hoping that by just getting out in the world and living my life, the chronic illness would get better, which was a farce. But, I'm in my 20s and I don't know. I'm just finding out. So I said to the girl finally, like, I have to go home. Like, I'm gonna have a mental breakdown. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I have to break this lease. I can't, I'm going home. And she and her dad were very nice, and they let me break the lease and not pay any penalties. And they just let me walk away because they totally understood that it was because I was having a really hard time. And so I think back to that time when I couldn't sign that lease because I was going to throw up on it. And I found out afterwards that apartment I was trying to sign on had a horrible bed bug problem that the agent didn't tell me about. And they'd sprayed multiple times and could not get rid of it. And so that's why she was having so keen on renting it, and for the price it was. And I didn't know this girl was going to bail on me, so I would have moved into a bed bug apartment with no roommate. I wouldn't have been able to afford it, so I would have had to find a roommate I didn't know. So I would have been living with a stranger in a bed bug apartment with a lease that I couldn't break because it's an agency. And if you do break it, you pay the penalty of the whole year's rent up front, which you obviously don't have because you haven't worked the whole year. So I would have been on the hook for like $10,000 or more. By contrast, I was easily able to break this lease. I didn't know I would hate New York so bad. I didn't know I would hate my job. I didn't know all these things would happen, but I was let out of them because I listened to that guidance and didn't sign that lease. And by listened, I mean I was forced to listen. I could not sign that lease. But I always wondered if I was like insane. But really, that's the universe's way of showing us when we shouldn't be doing something actually in our highest interest. So it's just one example of how pain that we don't really like to talk about or look at or we don't really want it in our lives, that painful situation with the lease ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me. So I went home. I almost immediately got a part-time job at a publishing house in Boston, where I was from. And it was a kids' book publishing house. This was like a lifelong dream of mine, to work in kids' book publishing. And one of my first jobs was this job at the publishing house, and it was a job share with the art director of the franchise department, which worked on the Curious George franchise. So I was like a part-time director on the Curious George books, and among others, and it was just awesome. I mean, it was way better than I thought would happen. And all of this because New York was an enormous failure, and I couldn't sign that lease, and I had to leave. Also, I have extraordinary dreams, and I have a lot of past life dreams. And I had a past life dream a while after I left of myself as a nun in like the World War I, World War II era. And I was in a church, and I was taking care of dying soldiers. And one of the dying soldiers that I took care of in her last moments, and in that lifetime she was a he, was this girl in New York that I had lived with briefly, who let me out of that lease. And in that lifetime, I had done her the favor of allowing her to die with compassionate care. That was at a time when they didn't really do hospice. So I had people like banging on the door of the church, like, "You're insane. You have to leave now. You're going to die. Like, the soldiers are going to die anyway." And I said, just because they're dying doesn't mean they don't deserve care. So I basically tried to make her comfortable before she died in that lifetime. And she returned the favor by letting me out of a situation where I was dying in New York, compassionately. So it's kind of interesting how life weaves these webs, not just in one lifetime, but in multiple lifetimes across multiple storylines, and how something uncomfortable and painful can be like this pivot point and this highlight of like a really important life-changing moment, a decision I wouldn't have made unless I was in so much pain that I couldn't do it. A situation I wanted to go a different way didn't turn out that way because of pain, and it ended up kind of causing this chain reaction of positive events that vastly improved my life. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about me, you can check out my website, which is www.meet-shruti.com, linked below. Also, since I am a vastly better writer than I am speaker, I'd highly recommend checking out my book, The Hidden Value of Not Knowing, also linked below on Amazon. And of course, I'm obligated to say you should like, subscribe, comment. See you next time.